The words hung in the air, sharp and brittle, like shards of ice. Honestly, you're just broke. My sister, Sarah, didn't even blink. Her gaze was fixed somewhere over my shoulder, as if assessing the threadbare patch on my favorite sweater, a sweater I'd owned for 5 years, a sweater perfectly functional and comfortable, a sweater that, to her, apparently screamed destitution. It was at her daughter's 7th birthday party, a lavish affair at an indoor play center, complete with a magician and a catered buffet that smelled aggressively of processed cheese. My contribution had been a carefully chosen, reasonably priced toy and a heartfelt card. Apparently, that wasn't enough. My normal life was a quiet hum of routine. I worked a steady, respectable job that paid the bills, allowed for modest savings, and funded my small apartment filled with books and a well-loved collection of potted plants. I wasn't struggling, not in any way that impacted my quality of life or my ability to meet my obligations. I was comfortable, content, and decidedly not broke. Sarah, on the other hand, operated on a different plane. Her husband, Mark, a man whose ambition seemed solely dedicated to acquiring things, had always been the architect of their financial extravagance. They lived in a sprawling house in a gated community, drove imported cars, and vacationed twice a year in exotic locales. Their social media was a curated feed of perceived perfection, a stark contrast to the quiet sincerity I cultivated in my own life. The broke comment wasn't just an observation, it was a judgment, a pronouncement from her ivory tower. This wasn't the first time Sarah had deployed such barbed pronouncements. There was the time, years ago, after our father passed, when I'd inherited a modest sum. While Sarah and Mark immediately earmarked their portion for a down payment on a bigger house, I'd quietly used mine to pay off my student loans and establish a robust emergency fund. Still paying those off, she'd asked, her voice laced with a faint, condescending surprise, as if the very idea of debt was alien to her. Or the Christmas when, instead of the latest designer handbag she'd hinted at, I'd gifted her a framed photograph of the two of us as children, a genuine moment of shared joy captured on film. She'd thanked me politely, her eyes scanning the room for her real gifts, a flicker of disappointment crossing her face before she masked it with her practiced smile. Her need for external validation, for the constant affirmation of wealth and status, was a deep chasm I'd learned to navigate by offering a steady, unyielding silence. I'd stopped expecting understanding or acknowledgement from her, settling for a polite distance that allowed our relationship to exist, albeit tenuously. Mark, ever the echo of Sarah's sentiments, had once referred to my car as a rental, even though it was the same reliable model I'd owned for years. Each comment, each subtle jab, chipped away at the facade of familial affection, leaving behind a gritty residue of resentment. The day of the incident was a Tuesday. A Tuesday that had started like any other, with coffee and the morning news. Sarah had called, her voice tight with an unusual urgency. "Can you come over? Mark needs a hand with something. It's important." I'd agreed, assuming it was some household project that required an extra set of hands. I arrived to find their meticulously manicured lawn strewn with boxes, and Mark, looking uncharacteristically flustered, wrestling with a large, flat-pack furniture item. Sarah stood on the porch, arms crossed, directing with a sharp tone. It was clear this wasn't a simple assembly. Hours passed. The sun dipped, painting the sky in bruised purples and oranges. Mark grew increasingly agitated, his frustration boiling over into sharp, accusatory words directed at the unassembled shelves, then at me. Sarah, instead of intervening, offered passive commentary, her words laced with a familiar superiority. Then it happened. Mark, red-faced and sweating, slammed a stray bolt onto the patio. "This is impossible. We're never going to finish this. It's like trying to build a house with nothing." He threw his hands up in a dramatic gesture, his eyes landing on me. Sarah, seeing her opportunity, chimed in, her voice dripping with saccharine sympathy, a stark contrast to the venom that usually simmered beneath. "Oh, Mark, you know how it is. Some people just aren't cut out for this kind of thing. They don't have the resources, the knack for it. It's not their fault, really. They're just broke." The word, delivered with such casual finality, landed like a physical blow. The air crackled with unspoken tension. The meticulously assembled facade of their perfect life, so reliant on their perceived financial superiority, had just been used as a weapon against me. Mark, oblivious to the deeper meaning, nodded in agreement, his focus still on the stubborn furniture. Sar. However, held my gaze for a fleeting second, a triumphant, almost predatory glint in her eyes. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated contempt, and in that instant, something inside me shifted. I didn't rage. I didn't scream. I didn't even raise my voice. I simply stood up, dusting off my hands, and said, "I need to go." Sarah looked surprised. "Go? We're not even done." I offered a small, tight smile that didn't reach my eyes. "You'll manage." I walked to my car, the engine humming a low, steady tune. The drive home was a decompression chamber, the city lights blurring into streaks of neon. I didn't dwell on Sarah's words, not really. Instead, I focused on a different kind of planning. For months, I'd been discreetly researching legal loopholes and financial agreements related to shared family property. Our parents, before they passed, had been meticulous about their estate. They'd established trusts, wills, and a complex web of interdependencies designed to ensure fairness. And I, the quiet one, the one deemed broke, had taken the time to understand it all. The next morning, I sent an email. Not to Sarah or Mark, but to the executor of our parents' estate and their legal counsel. The subject line was simple, regarding the lake house property. I attached a scanned copy of a specific clause from our father's will, a clause that detailed provisions for shared ownership and the right of first refusal in case of disputes or financial exigencies. It also outlined a mechanism for dispute resolution, a forgotten arbitration process that required unanimous consent from all beneficiaries for any significant sale or transfer of assets. The key was a subclause I'd stumbled upon: any beneficiary found to be in demonstrable financial distress, as defined by a significant default on secured loans or bankruptcy proceedings within a specified period, would forfeit their rights to dispute such a resolution and would be subject to a predetermined buyout at market value, assessed by an independent appraiser. Mark, bless his ostentatious heart, had recently leveraged a significant portion of their shared family assets, including their stake in the picturesque lake house we'd inherited, as collateral for a speculative business venture. The venture, predictably, had imploded spectacularly a few weeks prior, leaving him in a precarious financial position and Sarah deeply anxious about their dwindling reserves. They had, in effect, declared their broke status through their own reckless actions. I received a frantic call from Sarah later that afternoon. Her voice was shrill, a stark contrast to the measured calm of my email. "What is this email? What are you doing?" I listened, my face impassive. "Just ensuring all terms are met, Sarah." Her next words were a torrent of accusations, a desperate attempt to regain control. "This is insane. You can't just do this. Mark is furious. He says you're trying to extort him." I let her rant, picturing her pacing their marble-tiled kitchen, her perfectly manicured nails digging into her palms. "The will is clear, Sarah. And Mark's recent financial activities have triggered a specific clause." A heavy silence fell on the line, broken only by her ragged breathing. Then, her voice dropped, a low growl replacing the hysteria. "You're doing this because I called you broke, aren't you?" "You spiteful little," I cut her off, my voice as cold and precise as surgical steel. "No, Sarah. I'm doing this because my parents intended for their legacy to be protected. And because I understand the value of a promise, and the consequences of breaking one." The call ended abruptly. I didn't block her number. I didn't need to. The fallout was swift and messy. Texts flooded my phone from Sarah, interspersed with desperate calls from Mark, their pleas escalating from indignant outrage to tearful begging. Flying monkeys descended, cousins and aunts relaying Sarah's skewed version of events, painting me as the villain, the vindictive sibling. They spoke of family unity, of putting differences aside. I responded to each with the same polite, unyielding calm. "The legal documents are quite clear, I'd say, or, the executor is handling it." Their pleas for me to back down, to be the bigger person, were met with the same quiet resolve. The independent appraisal came back, a figure that represented a significant but fair valuation of their stake, a valuation that would leave them with little more than pocket change after their debts were settled. The news filtered back to me through the grapevine. Mark's business partners were suing, Sarah was frantically trying to sell off other assets, their meticulously crafted image of prosperity was crumbling like dry earth. The lake house, the symbol of their perceived success, would soon be mine, a quiet testament to their hubris and my silent strength. Sitting in my apartment that evening, surrounded by my books and my plants, the quiet hum of the refrigerator was the O-N-L-Y sound. There was no exultation, no triumphant whoop. Just a deep, settling calm. Sarah had tried to diminish me, to label me with her own insecurities. In her world of glittering surfaces, anything less was failure. But she'd underestimated the strength found in quiet resilience, in careful observation, and in the unwavering belief that true value isn't always measured in dollars. Her words, meant to wound, had simply been the catalyst for a necessary rebalancing. The quiet justice was not in their financial ruin, but in the stripping away of their arrogance, the dismantling of their false edifice of superiority. They were left with the stark reality of their own making, a consequence as inevitable as the turning of the tide. And I, the one they dismissed as broke, was simply standing on solid ground, watching the storm they'd conjured for themselves.